How's it going?
Is that going to be your intro to every one of these?
Exactly. Just me clapping, sync the audio.
That's awesome.
So we're here, first episode of...
That's right. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're here. Flow Renovation Podcast. We don't have a name, honestly, but it'll be something like that. I'm here with Paul Smetona, a real estate investor, friend as well. Know each other for about 3 years. Paul, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Nothing like a good old interview. So, I feel like I'm applying for jobs again, so I would never do that. I've been building things ever since I was a kid. I was into building remote-controlled airplanes, and even when I was like 5, I remember I would be like, we didn't have a TV growing up. My parents were very much like anti-technology, which I'm actually kind of thankful for now, although at the time I hated it. But so I'd be like building, paper airplanes and run outside building gardens, like whatever I could do to keep myself busy. And I've always kind of had that drive. School was never my thing. I did reasonably well, but I hated it. I pushed myself through college and kind of hated that too. But I knew I loved building stuff, so figured I'd go into engineering and got a degree in mechanical engineering. Went and did the whole professional engineering thing for about a decade. I spent 5 years designing streetlights for General Electric. And then I spent another 5 years doing designing and figuring out how to build LED grow lights for the hydroponic industry. And somewhere along the way, when I was in high school, actually, to go backwards a little bit, I kind of got the entrepreneurship vibe. My school, went to university school here in Cleveland, or out the east side in Huntington Valley, and they had a program that was amazing. It was like a entrepreneurship competition where basically they give everyone, say, hey, you've got 6 months, you have to start a business. Come up with a business plan, go through the whole thing, and win a competition at the end of it. And I think it was called like the Entrepreneur Cup Challenge or something like that.
Nice.
And so I remember being like, oh, maybe I'll give this a shot. We'll see. And ended up winning it. So I started, I think I might have been like, I was probably a sophomore or junior. But I set up like at the time, this is when like the iPhone had just come out, like iPods were all the craze. And I figured out how to go on probably Alibaba or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but buy, knockoff iPods and then make a website to sell them here. And actually ended up winning the competition, and then went on. There was like another like local, it was like a Northeast Ohio type of competition, a little bigger one that actually had a decent cash prize, I think. Went on and won that as well. And they wrote an article about it in the Plain Dealer. And I was like, oh, this is great. So I wake up the next morning and I had like, 100 orders, and I had like 3 up to that point, right? Like literally nothing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So then I had to figure out like, well, I don't even have them yet. Like I had like 2 or 3 sitting there. So I had to like order them, but I wasn't 18, so I wasn't able to like get that stuff done. So it was a whole process to figure out how to get around all those issues. And long and short of it, I thought it would be a great thing. And then like 2 weeks later, I got a call from an attorney for Apple.
Oh,
wow. And I'm like 16 years old, and they're like, hey, we saw this article, but these are infringing on our patents and all this kind of stuff, and you need to shut it down. And I was like, oh, sure. And if I ignored them, and I kept doing it. And then like a month later, I got a call from the same attorney, and she was like, hey, you said you were going to shut this down, but the website's still up, and one of our, we ordered one and we received it, so we know you're still shipping them. So then I actually had to shut it down. But anyway, back to where we are. That was always my goal, was to start a business of some kind. I never really liked the structure of like working for people particularly. Mm-hmm. I wanted the freedom and the independence and the responsibility of kind of making my own success or failure. And ultimately, I think after kind of 10 years in the industry, or really around 5-6 years in, I realized that those dreams and the things I wanted to do and the lifestyle I wanted, it was all slipping away. It was really clear every year I went further industry, I kind of got a little more depressed about it. In the engineering world, it was very cut and dry. It was like, you're going to work your ass off. And if you really do a great job, maybe you'll get a 3 or 4% raise each year, which will be just enough to cover inflation, unless it was last year, in which case it wasn't. And then after, you spend your whole life doing this, when you're 60, maybe you'll be like a GM and make like a decent salary, but nothing amazing, and then you'll retire and be able to live the last 30 years of your life. If you're really careful with your spending, you'll be able to make it through. And it just wasn't appealing to me at all. I felt like such a lazy person through my engineering career. Like I had a hard time being motivated, and I kind of assumed that's just who I was. But it didn't take long when I started buying real estate to realize I wasn't lazy. I just didn't care about that particular job. So fast forward to today, about 4 years ago, I started buying my first couple properties, and now I'm sitting about 4 units. Been completely self-sustaining by real estate as my full-time job for the last year and a half. Recently, I also became a real estate agent just to add a kind of an additional stream of income. And yeah, that's kind of how we got to where we are. A lot of background, but really it just started with buying one house and then another, and I'm sure we'll go more into kind of how that whole process.
Absolutely. Yeah, as an interview question, you did great. You definitely hired.
Am I hired by Flow Renovations?
Yeah.
Just beware, I might be lazy if you're hiring. I don't like looking for people.
I'm glad that you found out drop shipping by yourself at age 13, 14 or whatever
I
it was.
did, yeah, it was probably 15, yeah.
That was a side of you I didn't know about.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I was always trying to fiend to make some way, some kind of money somehow. But,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, then that ties into the question I had is how you getting started. What made you get into real estate? You mentioned freedom and having the ability of working for yourself and building something for yourself.
Sure.
On that, then how was the process of you purchasing your first property?
Yeah, so maybe to take even one step back past that is why did I buy the first property?
Right.
And at the time, I remember I was getting a little burned out with engineering. Wasn't really happy with where I was at. I had started a new company and they were working me like a dog. I was working as an engineer designing products, but we were working with a lot of partners in China. They would kind of help with the manufacturing and part of the design as well. So I would kind of own the design at a high level, and then at a more detailed level, they would be handling a lot of the kind of mechanics of getting stuff to work because we didn't have a big team. The problem was that they are 12 hours apart from us, and we were under really tight timelines. We had a lot of different programs with a lot of pressure on them to perform. So we'd work all day and then all night have to work with China. So my days were like, 5, 6 a.m. they'd start. I would catch them at the end of their shift. Then I'd go to work at 7 or 8. I'd work until 6 or 7 p.m. And then around 6 or 7 p.m. they're coming back online. I would go home, eat dinner, and have 3 or 4 hours more meetings with China. It was just awful. It was like 5 a.m. to midnight. My boss at the time was a dick. He was such an asshole. He pushed us so hard, but he just made me miserable. And I hated it. And I was like, I need a break. Like I need to get out of this. I was the most unhappy I've ever been with anything I've ever done in my life at that point. And I was learning a lot, but I just was really unhappy. So I was thinking, like, what can I do? Like, can I just go, like, travel to Thailand or just go somewhere and just spend, like, 6 months just, like, walking around in the jungle? I was like, I'm so done with this. But the problem was, I was like, well, I had a ton of student loans, and at this point, I had just paid them off. I'd worked really hard to pay those student loans off, and I thought about it, and I was like, well, if I could start some sort of business that, even if it was just, like, $2,000 a month, but if I could get that to be relatively passive and be able to manage it from anywhere in the world, then I could go to Thailand or Africa or China, just go somewhere different where I could go run around in the jungle and just forget about this whole life and just like reset. And so I was thinking through all these different things. I'm like, can I maybe start some sort of software? Or can I do some drop shipping again? Or can I do something where I can sell a subscription and make, $10 a month from 200 people and have my $2,000 a month? And the more I thought about it, I realized that really anything I could do that would be something that's kind of just like a quick and dirty, like here's a way to have something I can sell. The risk is that as soon as I would move away and go travel and try to do it, like all someone has to do is make something slightly better and then I'm out of business. It's really hard if you're not an expert and don't have some kind of barrier to entry. It's really hard for that to be sustainable and stable. And even if you are the best, like look at, MySpace, all it took was Facebook to take them from one of the biggest tech companies in the world to being out of business. Or look at BlackBerry. Look what happened when iPhone came out, just wiped out. And like that's how business is. It's so competitive, and it takes very, very little changes for you to go from being have a wildly successful business to it being out of business. So I was thinking through all these different things and just kind of bouncing off my ideas and felt like I had no direction. And then I kind of landed on real estate. I had a friend of mine who actually became my partner, Jack Mitchell. He was doing some real estate with his parents, and I was asking him like, hey, how does this work? Like you buy a house, you rent it out, like what do the numbers look like? Like how much can you make? And so we started breaking down the numbers for me, like, yeah, you buy a house, you might be able to make, maybe $5,000, $10,000 a year in cash flow if you buy the right one. And this was 2019. Cash flow was a little easier back then. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I kind of did the math. I'm like, well, shit, if I buy a few houses, like, that's pretty stable. Like, no one's going to start a new house, new type of house that's suddenly every existing house is going to go vacant. Like that's a really stable thing. You own the property, like, unless something goes dramatically wrong, like, you're safe. So that kind of clicked to me, and that's when I realized, like, oh, real estate's going to be my business. I kind of realized it then and never looked back. So immediately I went and started looking for homes. And as far as how I bought that first home, didn't have a lot of money. I had saved up. I paid off all my student loans, and I had been living really cheap. So I had this big fat student loan payment that I was saving every month. I think it was like $3,500 a month or so. I was paying on my loans up to that point. So I was like not spending that. I was just letting it sit in the account. So I had maybe 20 or 30 grand that I'd saved up in the last couple months, or 6 months until I paid off my student loans. So I found a house. I started looking around on Bigger Pockets and other places just for like a cheap house I could rent out. And I found a 4-bedroom, 1-bath home in the west side of Cleveland, which I bought for $22,000.
Nice.
It was occupied by 4 unrelated adults. We bought it with cash, no mortgage needed. It was 4 unrelated adults splitting a mortgage or a rent payment of $800 a month with 1 bathroom. So it tells you what kind of class of property we were dealing with. And funny story, that's the one that you ended up rehabbing for us.
Right.
The first home rehab you did for us years later. We ended up selling that. I think we sold it for like $110,000 last year. So it ended up being a good story. But that's how we got started. And we bought the house for $22,000. It was bringing in $800 a month. Like, even after some expenses, it was $500-600 a month in the bank. And about a couple weeks after buying it, I went and took a home equity line of credit on it, and they appraised it at $42,000. Gave me a $28,000 line of credit at 5% interest. So I actually had $6,000 more than when I started, and then went and bought another one, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. And how many units you are so far now?
Right now we're about 40. So I don't own them all exclusively myself, but between the stuff that I do own myself, the stuff that I have with a partner, multiple partners, it's about 40 units right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, the house was.
It was a fun one.
It was a fun one. And so tell me a little more of where you are right now. So you mentioned you have 40 houses. You have partners.
Yeah.
What kind of homes you looking at buying, and what's your goals for purchasing them?
So right now, we started with a lot of small multifamily and single family properties. So I think we bought a single family, another single family, a 4-unit, a 3-unit, a duplex, another single family, a few others. Moving into this past year, about a year ago, we bought a 7-unit building in Lakewood, which has been a good one. We just finished the renovations on that. So it's been a little bit of everything, but right now, my current business model is I'm buying a lot of single family homes that are off market, in middle, B-, C+ type of neighborhoods, places that are clean, but maybe just a little ugly on the inside, but fundamentally, structurally, the bones are good, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been buying a lot, this year I think we bought maybe 13 or 14 so far this year, and
that's awesome.
First week of June. So we're trying to pick the pace up. It really has accelerated. Our goal is to buy at least one a week. We're a little behind, but for the last month or two, we've actually been exceeding that. So the goal is basically we're buying these little single family homes for $70,000-$80,000 that are probably worth like $100, and we're doing like $10,000 of work to them, and they're worth like $115, $120. So at the end of the day, so we're able to, by the time you pay your holding costs and your fees and your commissions and everything, we can make $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 in each one of these. But the goal is we're basically going to keep about half of them, and the other half we sell. So that way, the ones that we flip and sell will pay for the ones that we keep, so that we have a self-sustaining business where we're not having to dump cash into it in order to acquire properties and grow. So that's really where we're focused right now. But at the same time, I'm also looking at some larger multifamily stuff. We've been making offers on stuff in the 15, 20, 30, 40 unit space. They haven't really connected on any. It's a tricky space right now. But moving forward into the future, we are looking at that. But for the time being, for 2023 and maybe into 2024, I'm really focused on just kind of getting really good at this, at scaling the single family business. Try to take it from one property a week to 2, and hopefully 3 or 4 a week by the end of the year. That's kind of where we're getting those systems and the structures in place to be able to just be really efficient at that, and just kind of get as good as we can at that, and then use that as a launching pad to scale to whatever else we want to do, whether it's more multifamily stuff or whatever.
That's awesome. Let's dive a little bit into that. So when you mentioned you buy a home for $70,000 and you put $10,000 into it, total, correct? What are the things that you're looking at of value add? What gives you the best return on your investment that you can appraise it for so much higher? Yeah,
so it's a good question, and it's been a long journey to get to this point where we're doing what we're doing, because the first 15, 20, actually probably more, the first 25 units or so that we did, my partner Jack and I, basically almost all of those we did just with the 2 of us, and we did all the rehabs ourselves. So we were gutting the place, we were replacing all the wiring, all the plumbing, we were building the kitchens from scratch, we were tiling the showers, we were doing everything. And we did very heavy rehabs in areas where, they were usually the nicest house in the block by a lot when we were done with them. The nice thing is that we bought the properties pretty cheap. We did all the labor ourselves, so we didn't have a ton of cost into it. They were still expensive. But what we kind of quickly learned was that, hey, at the end of the day, we are improving these properties for the neighborhood. It's the nicest property in the neighborhood. We're over improving them relative to the comps. So we might buy a $60,000 duplex, for example, and put $150,000 worth of rehabs into it. Maybe it only cost us 60 or 70 because we did the work ourselves. But at the end of the day, if it's in an area where all the comps are only 100K, like, it doesn't matter that you put $150,000 of work into it. If you don't have a comp to show that it's worth that, when we would go refinance it at the end, we wouldn't really get credit for it. And I don't regret doing it because we have these really nice properties that are beautiful, and we have great tenants, and the rents are amazing because people will still pay more to rent it. But just when it comes to a sale or a refinance, if you don't have comps to support it, it's really hard to sell stuff. So fast forward to today, we're trying to be on the other side of that. So rather than having by far the nicest house in the block, we're trying to find something that's like a 25th percentile house and take it from a 25th to a 50th percentile house. So it means telling ourselves no when we want to gut the kitchen and we want to gut the bathroom and make everything beautiful. But instead, what we're focusing on is what is the average house like in this neighborhood, or maybe a slightly better than average house in this neighborhood. And then how do we find one that's basically that, but just has a couple of things that are ugly? Maybe it's full of junk and it needs to be cleaned out. It needs a paint job. Maybe it needs some new cabinets. Maybe it just needs countertops, stuff like that. So our strategy now is we kind of have a rule of thumb, which is however much we spend on the rehab, we need to be making at least that much on the flip, and hopefully more. And again, I'm not really gunning for the $100,000 flips, even though we have a couple going right now that are going down that route. That to me is kind of more luck than anything, at least in this market. What we're looking for is the really quick flips. We're looking for the ones that we can be in and out. I have a rule: we got to make a minimum of $10,000 a month on a flip. So if we're going to spend 3 months on a flip, we better make 30 grand. And if we're going to spend $20,000 on the flip, we better make 20,000 on the flip, even if it's only a 3-week flip. But most of our stuff, we're looking to be in and out for construction in less than 30 days. So just really quick, dirty, getting carpet, paint, maybe some cabinet pulls and a countertop and basic stuff like that, light fixtures. But we're not really looking to do heavy stuff.
Right.
I am still doing some of those on the side. I have some Airbnbs that we're launching. We're doing a $160,000 rehab right up the street from here right now on a really nice single family. Like, we're still doing those, but that's kind of on the side. But really my focus for growth and scaling are these quick and dirty. 80-90% of what we're doing are these little $10,000 kind of rehabs where all we're looking to do is find a place that could be your typical house in the neighborhood. Just needs a little bit of cleanup. We're getting them at a discount, giving them just enough of a lift so that we're not fighting this uphill battle of, hey, our house is 10 times nicer than everyone else's, will you please give us this appraisal?
Right.
Instead, we're on the other side where it's like, oh yeah, it's maybe not quite as nice as some of the other ones, but it's close enough and the appraisal sort of matches, or the sale if we're going to do that.
Understood. So you're shifting because I understand, I've seen a lot of the houses you've done, and they're really nice, right? So you shifted that because it's not as scalable to put in all this money that you have to take it out and fight with the refinance. And,
Exactly, and that's really being driven by just scalability.
It's
something that we can put more people on. We don't have to have as much oversight. We're not getting dragged down into these rehabs. So the other problem with a $150,000 rehab is you're probably spending 4, 5, 6, 7 months in there.
Yeah.
And the amount of overhead to manage that project, it's just
it's a lot.
It's hard. Like, you're gonna need a lot of people to be able to manage a lot of those projects, and you need a ton of capital. Those it's really expensive to do those rehabs, and even if you have a construction loan, you're putting the capital up front.
Right.
And then you get it back on the draw. But if you've got 5 or 6 or 10 of those in parallel, like, you might be out 500 grand in between draws, which, unless you're just loaded with cash like that, that's really hard to scale. Whereas in these little ones, we're putting in, $5, $8, $10,000 into them,
and then
it's so quick and it's so easy. We can be in and out in 30 days. We could do 10 a month and only need $50,000 to $100,000 in working capital to be doing that. So that's much more feasible.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so from where you started and all the 20, 25 units to where you are now, are there any systems that you have implemented that you see that to be game changers?
That's a good question. The answer is definitely yes. I'm trying to think of the ones that are the best examples. I think a big part of in terms of what's really allowed me to scale recently,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually been partners.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what's made it happen, and that kind of, I think, counts as a system. So the biggest thing is we still manage our entire portfolio. We was not only managing the rehabs, but doing all the work on the rehabs. I handle all the refinances and the lending, and there's just so much to do, and it makes it really hard. Like you're too busy doing all of that to really worry about building the business bigger. Right. You're just sort of taking incremental steps. But recently, so my partner Jack and I took on a third partner, David Barnett, and with him, we've really been able to kind of, and this is the part where the systems come in, really been able to divide and conquer. So Jack now, he and I used to do all the rehabs together. I no longer touch the rehabs. I don't even want to know what's happening in them. At a high level, I do, right. but I don't really want to know details. I don't want to know who's working on what, because that's not my job, and that needs to be his job, so that I can focus on the other part, which is getting this thing to scale. So he handles all of the construction. And then our other partner, David, is handling most of the general operations. So he's handling a lot of like the coordinating between like, hey, we've got a new property, who's going to set up the utilities, who's going to do X, Y, Z, kind of putting the right people in the right places. And then I'm really focused on deal flow, make sure we've got deals coming in, make sure we've got the right goals, make sure we're buying the right properties and passing on the wrong ones. So having that kind of three-way split where it's like I'm focused on getting us deals, making sure we have the money we need to get things done, making sure that we're buying the right stuff, and that we're setting the right goals for ourselves in terms of how much we want to build and how fast we want to grow. And then we've got someone else who's strictly focused on the construction, and then a third person who's really focused on all the rest of the operational stuff that kind of just has to happen for these to function. That's been what's taken us from buying 5 or 10 units a year to 5 or 10 a month, which is almost where we're at right now. And again, This is very recent. So last year I think we did, maybe like 14 units last year, 13, 14, and we've already done that many, through June this year, and really
That's awesome.
Started picking up since like it was really in March that we started buying. I think I only bought 1 or 2 until March. So really we've done like 14 in the last 3 months, and we're looking to pick that up even further. So, but having that kind of division of labor is what's allowed that to happen, and now we're starting to fill out, more help. We've got an admin person who helps us with stuff.
Yeah.
But at a high level, that's the answer. And I think at a micro level, I could go into systems for hours in terms of like the little systems that we've done for like, we just set one up yesterday, which is we buy these new properties, who's responsible for getting the utilities turned on? Like, it's a silly little thing, but like we run into this problem over and over again. So we have an admin who's going to help with that, but how does she know what account to put them under? Who's the account holder? What's the payment method? How does she even know that she has to do it? So we've come up with a system where we got just yesterday where David, the operational guy, it's his job when we close on a property, since he's always involved in that process. It's his job to assign the property to, hey, Carrie, our admin. Carrie, you're going to go, here's the information. This is the day we're going to close on it. And then we have a guy, Gavin, who's handling basically, he's starting to help us with like, tenant move outs as we need them and those kind of things. So he's going to get those two involved, so it's good. There's a clear chain of command. David knows to close on the property. He sends the message to Carrie and Gavin. Gavin is then able to kind of coordinate it from there. Say, hey, these are the dates the tenants are going to be out. This is when we need our utilities turned on, or if it's vacant, this is the day they turn them on. And it's a real simple little flow chart. But once you kind of have that, then like we just had a situation yesterday. We closed on a place. Construction started yesterday. Flooring guys went in there to start refinishing and said there's no power in the house. Like, it happens, it happens all the time. And those kind of dumb things, and there's 4 of us making phone calls trying to figure out what's happening. So on a kind of a micro level, those are the kind of systems we're implementing every single day. Every single day it's 2 or 3 of these things that we're doing just to try to get a little bit better.
You're running into the same issues over and over again. It only makes sense to automate them so everything runs smoother and there's less friction.
Exactly. And ultimately, like, my goal, I'm 100% focused on how do we scale this business. So how do we take it from 20 or 30 properties or 40 properties a year? Can we make that 400 properties a year? And the answer really is in reducing the friction and that's involved with every transaction. And these little systems are what do that. So by making this stuff really efficient, then it takes way less effort, and adding more properties doesn't add as much overhead. Because if you have like everyone causing 10 more problems and you had 20 more properties, like suddenly you've got 200 problems to deal with. So you really need to make sure at each property level things are as smooth as they can.
Yeah, or you get gray hair way before you have to.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to get a few of those. It's happening, but for more reasons than just that, but yes.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to dive into a little bit of how you approach the financing side of it.
I love financing.
So, are there any numbers that you look when you're looking at a property? What do you look at your comps? What are the first impressions that a property has to make on you so it catches your eyes?
Yeah.
Are there any deal breakers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It actually really ties into the systems question too.
Right.
So maybe I'll just go through my system for how we're doing that.
Okay.
So I think that'll answer the question. So right now, the system we have is, I get a lot of deals emailed to me. You know, we've bought from a lot of wholesalers over the year. We've got some really good relationships with title companies and other people who, sorry, they frequently kind of send us deals. They would send me deals, email, hey, here's something you might be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So I take all of those deals, which could be anywhere from 5 to 10 properties a day that just kind of get sent to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I send those to my partner, David. So I say, hey, this might be interested. And if it looks like garbage, I just filter it out. But anything that looks remotely interesting, like this is a neighborhood we like to buy in,
Right.
or whatever the case may be, I'll send that over to him. What he then does is he takes a look and just does a real quick look at the neighborhood, say, hey, 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, maybe it's in 44111, middle of the area, like West Boulevard type, or maybe just west of that. We'll do a couple quick comps, like, hey, this house should be worth, you know, based on comps in the area, $130,000. So what we're looking at then is, okay, well, I want to purchase this, and you know, you can use rough rules of thumb, like you want to be all in at 70% of value or something like that. But I've never really been a huge fan of those really rough rubrics. I prefer to actually understand what's happening. So what I've done is I've built a system model like in Excel where it goes in and we use the same strategy almost every single time for how we purchase. We're using a hard money loan to buy, and then on the back end we're either going to refinance into a 30-year product or we're going to sell it. So I've built that whole model out in Excel where you dump in the comps. You say it's going to be worth 130 grand. You put in your purchase price. It's going to be 75,000. You put in where your rehab's going to be, which is let's say 10,000. Is that a good deal or not? So it goes through the whole process. We're going to use our lender, hard money lender up front to make this purchase. Based on that, I know exactly what their fees are. I know what their origination is. So I've got that all built into the model. So it figures out what's your expense going to be to purchase on top of your actual purchase price. Then it looks at what are your holding costs going to be. You know, we assume it's going to be a 3-month rehab. You've got 3 months of interest on your hard money loan. You've got 3 months of utilities, taxes, all that kind of stuff. You've also got admin costs that we need to split out across it. So all of that gets added in. Then I look at what's the rehab budget going to be. So you figure out how much it's going to cost, and we've done enough now where we can kind of just look at one and say, hey, okay, that's a $10,000 rehab. So we have our rehab cost. Then if we sell it, we've got to factor in the commissions on the sale. We have to factor in any kind of closing costs that we might, or concessions or things that we might have to fix. So, you know, a little bit of a buffer for that. If we're going to refinance it, then we need to factor in, okay, what's the appraised value, and then also what are we going to pay in terms of closing costs and prepaids and all that kind of stuff again. And then from there we'll be able to figure out the loan to value, and then from there it calculates out like here's what your cash flow is going to be and all that kind of stuff. So now we have this really nice spreadsheet where you put in like 3 or 4 things in the top, and it spits out if you flip it you're going to make this much, if you hold it this is how much you're going to get back on the refinance and how much will be left in it. And I've got all that color coded, so if it meets our criteria it pops out green or red. And so we have right now my criteria basically on a flip. It has to make at least as much as we put into it. So on the rehab, so if we're doing a $20,000 rehab, it's got to make 20 grand. It needs to make a minimum of $10,000 per month that we hold it. And then beyond that, you know, that's really all it is. It's just, hey, if we're hitting these numbers, boom, it's green. It's a flippable property. And then on the renovation and hold side, if we're going to do that, then I'm looking at cash flow. So I'm looking to see that it needs the cash flow, and I'm usually looking for some kind of cash on cash return. Cash on cash is weird with our business model because a lot of times like you may get all your money back on the refinance, so like you're dividing by 0 and you get an infinite cash on cash return, which is great. But in general, you know, what I'm really looking at, because those numbers are always so massively huge for this type of model, I'm really just looking at numbers like, hey, I'm looking for at least 5,000-6,000 a year in cash flow, something like that. If we can do $5 grand a year in a single family house, that's good. That's all goes green. And then I'm looking at the bigger thing is how much capital is left in it. And right now my limit is $10,000. So if we're leaving more than 10,000 in the property, so 0 would mean that we get 100% of all of our expenses back. We have nothing sunk into the property. That's a perfect situation. Or sometimes we can even get more than that up. But a max that I'm willing to leave in is 10,000. So that's really how I'm doing these valuations. And as far as the systems, it's, hey, I send the property to David. David comes up with the ARV, the appraised value and what we expect it's going to be worth. And then our partner Jack will say, hey, here's how much it's going to cost to do the renovation because he owns that. We dump those numbers in. It either goes green or red, we buy it or we don't. So So it's really simple. We're at the point now where, I mean, it's not more than a couple hours of total time spent between the three of us to make a purchase.
That's awesome.
It's really efficient.
That's awesome. Again, with the systems and developing and automating.
Exactly.
I'm a big fan of that.
You have to.
What are some pain points that you're facing right now?
That's a good question. I mean, I think capital's been challenging for sure. It's hard. We're trying to buy a bunch of properties, trying to do a bunch of rehabs, and it's capital intensive. You need money for down payments. You need money for funding, seeding your construction, and that's probably been one of the big challenges. The other thing that's difficult is just the sheer amount of administrative work and stuff that comes with owning this many properties.
Right.
The amount of utility bills we have is insane. We're getting some help now. Again, we do have someone helping us with that stuff, and that's made a big difference. But at the end of the day, I think the most difficult part of it for the last couple months has been access to capital.
Okay.
I've recently been able to solve that for us. So I've been able to raise some private money that we're basically using. So we're still using hard money to buy these, but I was able to raise private money that covers our down payments and our construction draws. So now we're 100% funded. So now, and as we grow again, I'll have to raise more. But ultimately, our goal is that as these properties are getting flipped, those proceeds are what are going to pay for the next ones. But as this kind of new joint venture we've started is young, we're only a few months into it, and we bought a bunch of properties already. It'll take some time for those checks to start coming in.
Right.
You gotta buy the property. A lot of times they're unoccupied, so we have to give them time to move out, and then they move out, and then we do the renovation, and then you sell it, and then it goes under contract, and you have to wait all the way till it closes. So that whole process is lengthy. You're looking realistically even on a really good one. The best you're going to see is 3 or 4 months.
Right.
So for right now, we're still trying to kind of hit our growth targets, which means that we're using a lot of outside capital to do it, and hoping that kind of around somewhere on the end of this year, we'll really switch to being more self-funded. So initially, we're flipping more than half of these, just to kind of get that funding going, and the intention is as the checks start coming in is when we'll start keeping more of them.
Right, so you wouldn't need a third party to finance your properties. Okay.
Exactly, and we still probably will for other things, larger multifamily stuff, things like that.
Right.
We'll probably take partners on, but this single family game is relatively light on capital demand, so I don't think that we'll necessarily need third party capital long term to continue doing what we're doing. At least that's the business that I'm trying to build.
Absolutely. So if anyone wants to apply for Paul Smetona company position, they have to have a lot of capital. Do you need someone that, for example, to help you with operations or any other stuff, or what?
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of person you're looking at to help you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're looking for a lot of help right now. I mean, I think from an operational standpoint, we are looking for kind of 2 roles right now. I think that we're going to want to fill within the next couple months. One of them is somebody to basically manage our acquisitions. So the work that I'm doing right now, the work that my partner Dave is doing, we've got it pretty well down to a science, and I think we have it pretty well defined in terms of how we operate and how we do it, which to me means that's the point at which it's time to hand it off to someone and move up to the next problem to solve. So we're looking for somebody to kind of take over a lot of the day-to-day work that I'm doing. So we find a property that's good, but salami.
Hey, salami.
We got France. Salami, maybe salami that won't be hired for us, but that's hilarious. But anyway, so we're looking for somebody to kind of take over the whole acquisition channel. So it would be managing things from once we have a deal, let's say that comes into my inbox, or that somebody sends to us, or that we find on the market, or whatever it might be. Okay. Somebody to go run the comps for us, and then if it looks good, somebody to schedule Jack to go look out and find out what it's going to cost us to do the renovation. And once we have that information, they can run the model. I don't need to run the model. I've already built it. Like, it's pretty self-explanatory, so they can run that. And then once they run that, and if it's a green, then they say, hey, that would be the point at which they'll reach out to me and say, hey, this one looks like it's a good one. Do you think we should buy it? And I would say, yep, looks good. Everything's good. Checked off. Go ahead and buy it. So at that point, this person would then go put it under contract for us, sign the contract, take it to our lender, put it through the lending process, get them everything they need for underwriting. They manage that whole process. So basically, they would do everything that I'm doing now. I would just be sort of giving a little bit of oversight.
Awesome.
And we're looking for that person to be running probably 20 to 30 deals a month by the end of within the next year. That's kind of the way we want to scale that. So that's going to be a really important role. Someone just to kind of be like a VP of acquisitions type of thing. That's what I would call that. And then on the other side of the business, which is the kind of asset management construction side, we're looking for the exact same role there. So right now, we've got that covered, but we're looking for someone to be a project manager to just say, hey, you know, we might have 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 rehabs a month going soon enough. And when that happens, we're looking for someone just to kind of keep an eye on all those projects. You know, we have right now Jack, but maybe it'll be him, maybe it'll be someone else, depending on how big
We can talk.
Yeah, right, exactly. But we got somebody who's ultimately responsible for setting the budget, and so his responsibility is to say, this is what the finish that we're going to do based on the comps that we're trying to reach. We need to put $10,000 in to make it look like that. These are the items that are going to be done. We're going to fix this carpet, paint this, replace that window, put this countertop in. Here's the budget. It should take 30 days. Then he should be kind of done at that point. He may select the contractors that are going to do the work, but when it comes to actually checking in every couple days and making sure that stuff is moving, we're looking for someone to kind of manage it from there. So Jack would say, hey, here's the property, here's your scope of work, this is the budget and the timeline. We were looking for someone to be able to manage a bunch of these in parallel, where they're checking in with the contractors every day, they're making sure stuff's getting done. If something's not, they can kind of solve those problems, solve those things, figure out why stuff's not getting done, bring that to our attention if it's not there. So those are the kind of two roles that, you know, right now we're doing internally, but we're looking to, as we scale, we're going to need people full-time just focused on acquisitions and getting that kind of contracting work done. And that'll free me up to work on, you know, really building relationships with, whether it's with lenders or wholesalers or brokers or whoever. But, you know, building relationships, raising money when we need it, kind of running the business at a higher level, managing all the pieces underneath it. That's where I need to be focused.
Or going to Tulum.
Going to Tulum or going to Arabia, Europe, or whatever. Again, finally, 4 years later, finally going to walk around.
That's why you started all
the
along.
woods for 6 months. We're finally getting there. But so that's really what we're looking for right now. And again, those roles we're hoping to have filled before the end of the year, maybe even sooner.
That's awesome. Cool. I feel like we covered a lot of ground. Is there anything you would like to say?
Wow, I feel like it's my last words or something. Before I go in the electric chair.
Okay, let me do better.
No, it's good.
For someone who's looking to get started
that's a
now,
good question.
what would you tell them?
That's a really good question. So I think, you know, it's a hard time. It's a much harder time to get into real estate now than when I got in just 4 years ago.
Right.
You know, prices have had a huge run up in the last couple of years. Interest rates are higher. There's really limited inventory. It's way harder to find cash flow. It's just a much harder time to get into it now than it was a few years ago. That said, my recommendation 100% would be look at the assets that you have. So whether you have a job, whether you have cash, whether you have, your living situation, do you live in an apartment? Like, what are you doing? I think it really, the best things you can do, the easiest ways to step into real estate would be to like house hack. Like, can you take an FHA mortgage, even if you don't have a lot of money, but if you have some income, like use an FHA mortgage, go buy a duplex or a triplex or a quad somewhere in an area that's, you know, a decent area, but maybe a place that could use a little bit of work. If you're willing to kind of clean it up while you're there, live there for a year, rent out your other 3 units or 2 units or however many are left.
Which this is basically house hacking for people who don't know. It's
Exactly.
You buy a property, you're living one side, you're renting the other.
Exactly.
Basically living free. Or sometimes making money.
Yeah, and the biggest reason to do it is that it's expensive to get into real estate. Like, if you go buy an investment property, you're going to need 20% down. If you go buy some little off-market property, you might need to buy it all cash if it's cheap. So it's very capital intensive to get into it, and it's harder now than it was. You know, interest rates are higher, but also house prices are higher. It's just tricky to do. The beautiful thing about house hacking is that you get to take advantage of conforming loans that are designed for owner occupants. Instead of putting 20% down, you can put 3.5% down with an FHA mortgage or 5% down with a conventional mortgage. So you can go buy yourself, you know, a $400,000 quad in a nice area that's decent, and like, if you use an FHA mortgage and you ask the seller for a closing cost credit to cover your closing costs, you could be in that property for $14,000. It's nuts, absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
At $14,000, you can go buy, and I did exactly that. I bought a $400,000 quad over by the airport. It was a great building. All the units were 3 beds, 1.5 bath, like side by side townhome style units. They're rented for $11.50 a month. Should be higher, but I ended up turning one into an Airbnb after I moved out. But a deal like that, it's so little capital to get yourself 4 units in a cash flowing property. You live there for a year, move out. Like, even if nothing else, if you're able to get free rent, you probably recoup that $14,000 down payment in a year of not paying rent. So basically, 1 year later, you're $0 out of pocket. You move out, you've got 4 units that you just bought with effectively $0 when you factor in your rent savings. That's 100%, I think, the easiest way for people to get into real estate right now. It's not for everyone. You do need to have, you generally need to have good income for that to happen. So some people might have to get more creative. Maybe you have a lot of energy and a lot of hustle and you know how to do some contracting work, but you don't have a high-paying job and it's tricky for you to qualify for a mortgage. Then you could look at maybe someone with some capital looking to place it somewhere. Maybe you can partner with them. Like maybe you can say, let's go buy a duplex and I'm gonna go hustle. I'll repaint the whole thing. I'll help you manage it. I'll do whatever, and you put up the down payment and find some way to split it that way. And I'm still building my business that way largely now. We have our single family thing I talked about, but we also have a bunch of side businesses where we're partnering with capital just to take properties down. So all of those are options, but I think for sure if you can afford to do it, take advantage of conforming mortgages for owner occupants. It's the best thing out there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great point you made. If you don't have the capital, that's not only the only value you can provide.
Right.
There's many ways you can show up and add value to someone.
Yeah.
Right. I bet even like sometimes doing the work or managing or creating connections.
Sometimes even just looking for deals. Like there are people out there with money who just don't have time.
Right.
They'd love to invest, but they don't have time to go walk 3 different houses every day and put offers in and get rejected because there's 12,000 offers on houses right now. So even just doing that, like if you just go out there and scrub Zillow every day, talk to an agent, come talk to me and say, hey, I want to find XYZ investment property. I'll help you find it. I'll send you a bunch. You go put them together, you go look at them, walk them, and you've got a capital partner who's willing to put down, especially if it's like a friends or family type of person who trusts you. And you go do all that hustling, like just the hustle is worth a lot.
Right.
And I think
sweat equity.
Yeah, exactly. And there's always someone out there with capital who just doesn't have the time or the effort. And if you're willing to solve a problem for them, they'll be happy to cut you in on the deal.
Absolutely. Paul, this has been a blast. Where can people find you?
The best way to find me right now is you can look at me for me on Zillow. So I am a real estate agent. You can find me just Paul Smetona. Search that on Zillow. I think I'm the only one because I have a rare name, which is good. Smetona, Smetona, or alternatively on Instagram, you can find me at Smetona Homes. I've avoided the gram my entire life, and finally about a year ago, maybe a little less, I caved. Actually, last thing was beginning of this year.
Yeah.
I caved because I just wanted a place to put all the.
Your really, portfolio. Use it as a portfolio.
It's exclusively real estate focused, yeah. But I'm on there. I check there every now and then, and keep up with stuff. But you can reach out to me from either of those, and I'd love to help you buy your next house. I'd love to partner with you on a deal. I'd love to have you come work for us if you're the right person, whatever the case may be. So
right.
Or just shoot the shit. So whatever the case may be.
Awesome.
Hey,
it's a wrap.
Absolutely.
That was fun.
It was.
Thank you. Cool.
And clap.
Oh, it wasn't recording.
Actually?
No.
Bullshit. How long was that?
I saw you 42 minutes.
Well, that's perfect.
That was great.
That's perfect.
That was really good.
Cool. Good, man.
Yeah. You made it really easy too. Like I knew you were gonna do that because you're really good at talking.
Talk a lot.
You really. If you like this video, feel free to smash that like button, subscribe for more content, and I appreciate you spending your time with me. Thank you. Until the next one.